What is your work?
The real sort of aim of my work, right, what I love doing, is learning more about this wonderful structure over here. And I'm gonna take this brain over here because I think it's more beautiful. In fact, this brain is modeled after a real brain. This brain's name is Charlie, and it was modeled after a real woman's brain. And I'm just really fascinated by the brain. I like them. I like the way they look. I'm impressed that from this little thing that sits in your head, I mean, really, look, feel it.
Okay.
This is the size of a real brain. So a real brain is that size. It feels a little bit different in real life, but it's about that size. And everything we do comes from here. The fact that we're talking right now is because of this. And I want to know everything there is to know about the brain, and what I focus most on is the structure of the brain. And to do that, we need special machines, because we as humans are quite attached to our brains, and without our brains, we can't just open up someone's head and look into it, right? That would be a problem.
That's a problem cutting into.
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to do that to anyone, because I don't think anyone would volunteer for that.
No.
That won't be fun. So we need something, right? So
yes,
we need something like perhaps a camera to take, say, pictures. But a regular camera won't do that. A regular camera won't just take a picture through the head to see the brain. So we have special machines called Mri scanners. They're these big machines, and really what they are, it's a bit of a strange thing, right? It's really a big magnet, but through this big magnet, it can do really special things, and it can look into our head, and we can get information, and we can see different parts of the brain.
How does the brain work?
First, we're trying to see what different parts of the brain do. We know very much what the brain looks like, and then we need to understand how it is made up. So this is where all the processing, and this is the wires, so how everything is connected to each other. And it's through those connections, right, that, so let's say a bunch of people are friends, right, and they, as an individuals, we know a lot of things. I know things, you know things, your father knows things, my mother knows things, right? But through our relationships, we know more things. And it's sort of the same thing with the brain, that different parts of the brain do different things. So I told you that this part of the brain over here received visual information. And this part of the brain over here received what we hear, right? And maybe another part of the brain is connected to both of these parts, right? And it's through these connections that sort of the wonderful things that we do happen.
How is the example different people like me as a Down's people?
Okay. So how is the brain of someone who has Down syndrome? I'm not a clinical researcher. I don't do clinical studies, so I don't work with people who have conditions. In fact, most of my work, most of the subjects of my work are sort of anyone you'd sort of find in the street, generally students, because they have a lot of time in their hands and they can do MRI. They can take MRIs easily. They're relatively free. These scans can take about an hour of your time. The techniques that are used, so we were talking about MRI scans, right?
Yes, of course.
So this is the sort of technique that can be used to look into something like Down syndrome. I'm sure that there's plenty of research on Down syndrome.
Your work helps people.
To give some concrete examples, I think the most obvious, at least for my work, is I focus on the connections of the brain, right? How everything is wired up. And this is really important for example, neurosurgery. We want to, when a surgeon needs to operate on the brain, they want to make sure that they take out the smallest amount. They want to make sure that they if there's a part of the brain that is sick, that they remove all of it. But they also want to make sure that that is as small as possible. And with imaging technology and the techniques that I work with, MRI, so functional MRI and this structural type of MRI to understand the connections, we can perhaps help surgeons make sure that they're only removing the parts that they really need to.
Does the brain change?
Yeah, it does actually. So, well, the first obvious way the brain changes is as we grow up. When you see a brain forming, it looks very different. In fact, the brain starts off its life as a tube, and then it grows in different places at different rates. So some parts grow more, some parts grow less, and then it starts folding and becoming from a tube to it starts turning into this thing that you see over here. Actually, I have a good friend of mine working on trying to understand how this process happens, because we don't really know how this process happens. We know it does, but we don't exactly know how.
Everyone has the same brain?
Not exactly. So I like to think of this in terms of, so we both have eyes, right?
Yes.
And we both have a nose and a mouth and ears, but they're not exactly the same. And it's really hard to describe so the two people with the same, we sort of have the same face, right? We have the same features of our face, we both have noses, but we're not the same. I mean, instantly someone can recognize that you are you and I am me. And if you work enough with MRI scans and look at enough brains, you will start realizing that one brain looks very differently to another. So there are definitely these differences in brains. And of course there's some bigger differences and some smaller differences. There are some people who have difficulties in one area and excel in other areas. I know that there's work on people who are blind. So for whatever reason, that from their eyes, they have problems with their eyes and they can't see. We keep going back to this part of the brain, which is the primary visual cortex. So people who can't see, they can't read regular books. They won't read this Think magazine as it is printed out right now. But we know that there's Braille, so people can learn to read Braille, and it's been shown that people who are reading Braille, the activity shows up in their visual cortex. So it's almost like they are seeing the bumps on the page that they are touching.
Thank you for visiting things you have here.
Thanks, Denise, for asking me these questions. Yeah, it was fun. Maybe I couldn't answer all of them, but it was fun.